a 7-foot giant was born in filth. Not in a castle or a keep, not beneath banners or chandeliers, but in Flea Bottom, the worst slum in all of King's Landing. A place where the streets stank of rot and waste, where starving children fought rats for scraps of bread, and where most orphans died before they ever learned their letters. No one knew the boy's real name. No one knew who his parents were, or whether they had died of sickness, violence, or simple hunger. Their faces were lost to whatever misery had brought him screaming into the world. The other street children called him Dunk. Perhaps because he was slow to speak. Perhaps because the name was easy to shout in a fight. In Flea Bottom, you were lucky to have any name at all. Dunk learned to survive early. Not with swords or shields, but with fists, teeth, and stones torn from the mud. He was bigger than the other children, much bigger. By the age of 5, he stood taller than boys twice his age, broad-shouldered and heavy-boned, growing at an alarming pace. His size made him a target. Older boys feared him. Younger ones hid behind him. Then, one day, an old man appeared in Flea Bottom. He was a hedge knight, one of the wandering warriors who traveled from tourney to tourney, castle to castle, living on scraps of coin and fading honor. His name was Ser Arlan of Pennytree. Ser Arlan was ancient by any measure. His face was lined like old leather, his hair thin and white, and his hands trembled when he reached for his sword. But his eyes were kind, and in Flea Bottom, kindness was rarer than gold. Ser Arlan saw the boy fighting in the mud and stopped to watch. What he saw, no one could say. Perhaps potential. Perhaps pity. Perhaps simply a massive child who might grow into something more. He offered Dunk a choice. Remain in these alleys, fighting rats for food. Or come with him. Serve as his squire. Learn the sword. Learn what it meant to be a knight. Dunk did not hesitate. He was 5 or 6 years old when he chose the sword. For the next decade, Dunk traveled the roads of Westeros beside Ser Arlan. The old knight taught him everything he knew: how to clean armor, how to saddle a horse, how to pitch camp beneath the stars, how to speak to lords without offending them. Most importantly, he taught him honor. A knight protected the weak. A knight kept his word. A knight did what was right, even when it cost him everything. Dunk grew, and grew, and grew. By 16, he stood nearly 7 feet tall, thick as a castle wall, with sun-streaked brown hair and a body built for war. He was not clever. He knew this about himself. In his own words, he was thick as a castle wall and slow as an aurochs. But he was loyal, and he was strong, and under Ser Arlan's patient guidance, he became formidable with a sword. But Ser Arlan was dying. The coughing worsened. His hands shook more each morning. He tired after only a few hours on the road. Neither of them spoke of it, but they both knew the truth. They were heading for Ashford Meadow, where a great tournament was being held to celebrate the 13th name day of Lord Ashford's daughter. It was the sort of event where a hedge knight might earn glory, or at least enough coin to survive another year. Ser Arlan never reached it. One morning, Dunk woke to silence. He found his mentor cold in his bedroll, still clutching the worn wool blanket they had shared for years. The coughing was gone. The suffering was over. There were no septons. No bells. No songs. Hedge knights did not receive such honors. So Dunk buried him beneath a tall elm tree beside the road. He dug with his hands and a rusted shovel until his palms were bloody and raw. He wrapped Ser Arlan in his best cloak and laid his sword across his chest, the way heroes were buried in the old stories. Then Dunk prayed, awkwardly, imperfectly, asking the 7 to be kind to the man who had taken in an orphan and made him something more. When the grave was filled, Dunk stood alone with a terrible choice. He had Ser Arlan's armor, old and patched but serviceable. He had his sword. He had 2 horses. He had a few coppers. What he did not have was a knighthood. Ser Arlan had always promised to knight him someday. When you are ready. When you understand what it truly means. That day never came. Without the blessing, Dunk was nobody, just a giant squire with no master. he could return to Flea Bottom. Or he could take the armor, take the name, and ride to Ashford as something he was not. It would be a lie. The biggest lie of his life. Dunk stared at the fresh grave for a long time. The sun crossed the sky. Birds sang above him. Finally, he made his choice. He strapped on the armor. It pinched at the shoulders and left his wrists bare. He mounted his horse. "I'll be a true knight," he whispered to the grave. "Even if I'm not one yet." And with that, Duncan the Tall rode toward Ashford Meadow.